With that, I would like to introduce my enigmatic colleague, Kevin Jackson, to begin today's topic. Take it away, Kev.
Yeah, cheers, John. I like what you did there. Hi everyone. So now that OpenStack has reached the dizzy age of 10, we thought we'd have a little discussion on OpenStack and what the future holds. So what we'll do is we'll have a little introduction. I'll go through a little evolution of the architecture. But today we're going to go through basically some questions, some of the high level questions that people have around where OpenStack has come from and the future of OpenStack. And of course, we really do, like John said, we really do want you to submit comments and suggestions to us. So chat to John as we go through this session. If you're not familiar, the Ask the Experts series is a bi-weekly discussion on topics around backup and recovery. Like we said, interaction really is encouraged. We do like to get your thoughts, your comments, your suggestions, and certainly more so today on how we're going to do things. And if John remembers, he'll mention the person who wins the $50 Amazon gift card at the end of the session. So who are we? So this is us. This was taken when we were allowed to be less socially distant. So I'm the one on the left. I'm Kevin Jackson. I'm one of the senior solutions architects over here in EMEA. And over on the right-hand side, we have John Tobin as my US counterpart. I have no jokes to say about John today. I know you'll be disappointed, just like John is with himself every single day. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. John's a great guy. And as I say, we're going to do some things a little different today. We're going to have a little bit of a back and forth, a QA session. And this is where we want your comments coming through on the chat. So let me begin by going through the evolution of architecture. I've probably done this about 3 or 4 times. So if this one really looks rubbish, we'll just, when it comes to the recordings, we'll just put the better version on through this section. But essentially, look, everybody knows we started off with physical machines. And in those days, it was a lot more simple. You walked into a data center. There were machines strewn across the data center, but you could literally pick out your Windows servers, your database servers, and those file servers with the sticky notes that says "Do not, under pain of death, turn this machine off." So that were the simple days. But of course, as technology grew and things got more powerful, it just didn't make sense to run single applications on those servers. So as we're talking x86, back in the late 90s, VMware created the ability to do x86 virtualization, and that obviously spawned a whole industry of obviously virtualization and various clones, and then leads us into the world of cloud that we know today. Of course, cloud is essentially virtualization with a load of tooling and structure around it, which makes the job of IT administrators a lot easier, as well as people consuming that platform in a way that makes sense in terms of basically producing a service. So that's where we get to in terms of our life with OpenStack. And if you can hear my dog, I do apologize. That's Nala. She's my assistant here. So I do apologize, and I'm surprised I've managed to make it about 3 months into the series without her making an appearance. Let's move on. So we have OpenStack at 10. So happy birthday to OpenStack. Now, one of the nice things about OpenStack, or certainly from my side of things, is I've been on that journey for the whole 10 years. I know it's I can't believe it as well. I'm still living and breathing. I've got a lot more gray hair, But also, it was my 11-year wedding anniversary yesterday. So again, the correlation of the gray hair could be, related to that. I'm not 100% sure. But either way, I started with OpenStack at the Austin release. And those were the days where you would spawn or try to spawn an OpenStack instance, and the success was it actually worked. So I'm glad that we've moved on from those days into the world now, where obviously people are relying on this infrastructure. They have large installations of OpenStack. In fact, we see the wide gamut of the installations from the small to the large. And yeah, it's been a really exciting journey. It's definitely has its ups and its downs. So let's move on. Let's go on and let's see how we go with these questions.
Great. So Kev, question number one. So how has OpenStack adoption changed over the last 10 years?
So yeah, it's quite interesting because I think OpenStack itself obviously has evolved. It has gone from an enterprise. Well, actually, it started off life as a public cloud software. It was designed, perceived by Rackspace and NASA back in the early days. With the basic premise of the fact that there was this cloud player on the market, the Amazons of the world, and this was going to be the challenger to that. Those kind of like early premises of cloud itself comes into play. I mean, obviously that's where this hype around cloud and OpenStack comes in the fact that as people tried to work out what cloud meant for them, how to move into this new way of working, which was more than virtualization, where if we understand, virtualization, it's more about the resiliency of the architecture, whereas cloud is moving to the resiliency of the app, i.e. less resiliency of the architecture. We have seen that move. OpenStack has moved from the early days of trying to be a cloud player, a public cloud player, to one where it's found its nice place in the enterprise space. But of course, not excluding a large swathe of the market, which are telcos and service providers. So whilst it evolved slightly away from public cloud, it morphed into the enterprise world because people genuinely just couldn't move as quickly as they wanted to a public cloud. So they still wanted the features of cloud, but on their terms. But we also see the adoption in the telco space. That's a big take up of OpenStack, and a lot of the talk around, say, 5G and things of that ilk have OpenStack as the base. Well, from your side of things, John, from where you've come into OpenStack, how have you seen things, change, in the time that you've been working with OpenStack?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kev. I mean, I certainly don't go back nearly as far as you. My history with OpenStack's only, roughly about 2 years since I joined Trilio. I knew about it before then, but I think, in the time that I've been in the space talking with consumers and, also, the likes of Red Hats and Canonicals and Mirantis and SUSE when they were in the space, I think, OpenStack really has changed a bit in kind of its scale, I would say. In the broadening of its use cases, because as something I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more, I think a lot of the people that have been stuck with have not been stuck with, but have stuck with OpenStack over the years, have seen their deployments grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So scale has become a large selling point for OpenStack, and it's gotten much better at scale. So I think, from my perspective, a lot of the things that that OpenStack has been doing so well from the beginning and has known about have only gotten better. And it's gotten a lot better at distributed architectures as well, driven by a lot of these NFV use cases that we see, centralizing a control plane and having data centers distributed, throughout geographical regions or maybe even the world. I think I've really seen a lot of the performance aspects of OpenStack flourish, which it was already known well for, but I think have gotten much better over the last probably 5 releases.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Let's move on.
Yeah. So, Kev, in your opinion, why would people choose OpenStack today? If they weren't already on OpenStack, why are they going there now?
Yeah, so OpenStack, what it's got up to today, in terms of what's on the truck, what you have is a platform which plays really, really nice in the data center. I see it as a front door, and in fact, I've always maintained this stance in terms of OpenStack wherever it was in my career with this. I've always seen it as the front door to a whole load of disparate IT systems. So where I see people choosing OpenStack today is they are effectively utilizing OpenStack in a sensible way. So going back to the world of, say, the early days and the hype. The early days and the hype of OpenStack. I think people were jumping on to the bandwagon of OpenStack is going to be the panacea. It's a move away from traditional virtualization world. It allowed people to have a little bit more control maybe over their data and their systems, where they just weren't able to go into the public cloud. So what I see today, is this platform which plays nice in the data center. It's utilized for efficiency reasons. We see certainly a lot of architecture where OpenStack is the base for other systems, say Kubernetes and OpenShift, for example. But you get the advantages of what OpenStack is designed to do. It gives IT administrators the ability to control the IT systems in a very appropriate way. It appeals to the application developer world and the people who will utilize the actual cloud platform itself, as a tenant user. It gives them the flexibility, and the freedom to allow them to deploy their own systems, to deploy their development systems, and of course, used as a bridge to further cloud native kind of like worlds. But one of the other things which I see today compared to where we were is there's a lot more standardization. There's a lot more well understood architecture. There's far fewer players in the industry, which was potentially had led to some confusion and maybe a little bit of bitter taste in people's mouths early on as they adopted the wrong strategy. Whereas today, there's some big players out there, well-known ones that we, like sort of Red Hat, Canonical, Mirantis, and the other players, and even upstream providers of, say, OpenStack Ansible and Kohler Ansible. They're just well understood and, dare I say it, easy to deploy platforms. And I know you might get some comments now, John, but honestly, I will maintain the fact that it's a nicer platform to deploy today, and you should ignore the what happened 6, 7 years ago, and then maybe a little bit of infighting that happened around that time. And that brings me on to the kind of things of like, is it dead? Because let's be honest, that's a question which, if you went into Google, it helpfully asked if you start to question OpenStack. It's one of the things that Google even asks. And of course, it's not dead, but it's a shame. Obviously, I've got an affinity to OpenStack, and it's hard to hear this, but I've heard it for the last 10 years. Is it dead? So for a dead platform, it's doing really, really well. but it's yeah, the adoption isn't quite the same as it was in the hype cycle. I think that's more of a reflection of the maturity of the whole market as a whole. Don't forget, we're talking maturity of cloud itself, and this thing which grew up in this cloud world known as OpenStack, and it grew up in the open as well. But yeah, it's certainly a completely different beast to what it was, going back a good few years ago. And I just want people to understand that it's not that thing a few years ago. This is something which is an enterprise class cloud system that other cloud native systems are generally connected to or built upon as well. So but yeah, I mean, we see this in Twilio. We deal with new RFPs for things, John. And have you had any other insights into that?
Yeah, I think kind of zooming out a little bit, Kev. I think my kind of take on the reason why we're talking to people in new RFPs, people that aren't already on OpenStack, is there's really two trends I think that are starting to become common in IT organizations. One is open source first. I think a lot of IT organizations are trying to drive an open source first method of selecting new technologies, because they're trying to get away from lock-in, right? They're trying to get away from monolithic type architectures where they don't have the freedom of choice. So I think that makes OpenStack very attractive to them. And then I think, we're kind of at the point where, let's just call it cloud is too mainstream it's to the mainstream adoption phase really of it, and past kind of the top of that curve, so to speak. And I think on the backside of that curve is always a cost optimization phase. Yeah. In business as well, where customers may have run to a public cloud like an AWS or anybody else, right? And may be, seeing bills that they just weren't expecting in certain cases. So they have to go, well, I love the agility, but there has to be a better way where I can get a balance of both worlds. And I think that's leading them to look at alternatives. And OpenStack is still around, right? It's still around. It's still a good alternative. And there are big names out there running huge use cases on it. So, they have to kind of go look at it, right, as part of due diligence. So I think that's really what's driving people towards it these days, at a macro level.
No, that's, I agree.
I guess which leads us into our next question. So, in hindsight, and I think you'll probably have some good insight into this, is, what would you have liked to seen done differently with OpenStack?
Yeah, so I think, as I say, given growing up and seeing the all the hype, growing up seeing the kind of like the infighting, but also like the external influences of like the public cloud platforms as they grow up. It was all at that same point. But if we look at where OpenStack started, obviously OpenStack started, like I said, as pretty much aimed at the Amazon of the world, in terms of like this platform is going to be running in service providers around the world. It's going to be the open choice, basically, instead of going down the AWS, which, is obviously a level of lock-in. But of course, that itself is probably a whole topic in itself. So there was that side of thing. But as it morphed more into a world of the VMware kind of like competitor as well. So it was kind of like pulled in multiple directions. And I think that in itself, given the fact that it was getting pulled in the public way, it was getting pulled in the private way. And I think the early days, it kind of like lost its way slightly in terms of what the future looks like. So, obviously, hindsight is a wonderful thing. If we knew where we ended up today and what OpenStack looks like today, and the fact that it's an enterprise cloud, but has the ability for public clouds. And I know it almost says like, well, there you go. It fits both buckets. But I think to actually, if it set out to be that from day one, there would be less pulling and less vendors trying to make their own mark into how OpenStack got shaped. So because don't forget, in the very early days, pretty much every IT vendor had some dealing with OpenStack. There'll be a driver for this. There will be a product for this. There'll be a project for OpenStack. And so they all had the say into how this was going to be developed. And it's kind of like, whilst it's good in one respect for the fact that it plays nice with a lot of the IT world, we led to a world where every vendor wanted to make their own mark on OpenStack. It was a free-for-all. And so you had essentially, for example, almost more deployment methods and architectures than actual deployments. And that's never a good thing. That's why I like today's world where there's fewer players and it just makes a lot more sense. I'm just, old and tired, in terms of, of like trying to describe what OpenStack should look like, and move away from that world of it's up to you how you want to deploy this, because that helps nobody. But yeah, I think the infighting for early on, and which again, there was a number of factors, at play, but that's what I would have seen. I would have liked to have seen, more of a clear direction as to where we've ended up today. I was thinking, just in the expedience of time, should we move on?
Sure.
Okay.
So where are we seeing OpenStack deployed? I think we've kind of been dancing around this topic a little bit, as we've talked.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, certainly from my side of things, it's a spattering of smaller players where they are, for lack of a better term, it's an alternative to VMware, and I say that loosely. And I don't make that sound derogatory. I mean that in the sense of that's the most efficient route for these people deploying OpenStack. Just so much so that the fact that they are naturally progressing on cloud journeys, and people still are, into a world of less reliance on the infrastructure being the resilient layer. So we're seeing a lot of players now. We have a great success around that, and certainly around in EMEA. EMEA is weird in the fact it's good. It's my region. I'm allowed to say weird. It's good in the fact that there's there's lots of borders. There's lots of different control aspects. There's a number of different things to think of, and that's what I see around here. And that's where I see OpenStack is being deployed. There's small service providers that answer specific regulatory answers. We've got bigger players. And certainly, absolutely, most of my time over the last few weeks are certainly around, telcos and NFV, as well as service providers. What about yourself, John?
Yeah, no, I think, while EMEA is a bigger market, Kev, for OpenStack than, the US is right now. I think that, we see roughly about the same things as you, but I would say the one thing that I have noticed is, it's trending to larger and larger environments, people expanding their OpenStack deployments, especially when it comes to things like NFV. And then, like we were talking before, it's new customers coming into the space for, whether it's open source or cost efficiency or some other reason.
Yeah.
So yeah, we see a lot of people trying to run their kind of private clouds on OpenStack, which is good to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got some stats from the foundation. They sent me some nice people, the work there. And basically, so in terms of regions, we've got like APAC is to grow 36%, LATAM 27%, EMEA 22%, and North America 17%. So these are the the regions that are going to grow OpenStack, or the sizes, over the next few years. So yeah, I mean, it corresponds to what you're seeing over in the US, where there's a drive and move, say, towards Kubernetes, and obviously, over in EMEA, we've got a bigger take up, but it's it's probably a slower tail of moving to alternative platforms. So the big one.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's wondering, What's
Yeah.
the future? What's the future of OpenStack, Kev?
So yeah, I mean, I like to see the fact that obviously OpenStack has found its place. You know, in terms of if you're currently looking at OpenStack, you already have a good idea of what the capabilities are for OpenStack. You understand its place in life. You know, so from that point, you know, OpenStack is a viable alternative to wherever you are in your journey. You know, and I think most people are utilizing OpenStack to move from the many legacy world that still exists. They're moving into a cloud space, and whatever happens beyond there, which is obviously the interesting piece. But I do see that OpenStack isn't going to be completely exclusive for sure. You know, it's going to be part of a multi platform play and used efficiently. And I'm only saying that based on the growth of what we're seeing in those particular regions. You know, we're seeing various, you know, the market itself of OpenStack is going to grow. In fact, you know, again, just throwing another stat out here because we can, from the foundation, they've said that by 2023, OpenStack market is going to grow to 7.7 billion. So, you know, it's not a small figure. It's not a something you can, you know, shake your stick at. So it's something that's going to be here to stay. But the interesting thing is it's obviously you can't help but have a conversation around the future of OpenStack without talking about, say, containers and, for example, say, Kubernetes, because they're the conversations we're having. We're having the conversations where people are looking at their adoption of cloud. We're looking at where they are on that particular adoption curve. And we've got people who are either moving away from OpenStack to Kubernetes, or they're introducing Kubernetes, or in fact, most of my conversations, and I'll maintain over the last few weeks, it's a blend of all, you know, three platforms of virtualization, you know, OpenStack and Kubernetes. We've seen a lot of that. And I subscribe to that notion. I subscribe to the notion of the fact that this OpenStack software has found its place, and the fact that it's a good solid foundation for data centers, where that solid foundation allows you to be enhanced or to add on, you know, additional specific cloud native services, say like Kubernetes, because there's a handful of projects which play really nice in the OpenStack and container space. But I think it really is important to understand that people are not just wholeheartedly ditching VMs for containers, because you've got to really think about this. You know, VMs are not containers and containers are not VMs. There's a reason why those different technologies exist. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I guess does exist, and you know, there is a gap, and that's why there's projects to bring the two together, is for, say, security reasons. You know, so obviously containers have share a common kernel, hypervisors. They have a well-known security model called the hypervisor, and nobody ever sees it that way. They always see that containers are lightweight and VMs are heavyweight. Where the truth be told, it's a case of containers, you know, share a common kernel, and, you know, the OpenStack VMs, you know, they don't share a common kernel. So the security models are completely different. So there's pros and cons to either approach. But there's lots of projects out there that are trying to bridge the divide to make this world a nicer place. You know, such as the one that was started called Clear Containers, which is now known as, well, it's based off Clear Containers, called Carter Containers, which addresses the security context of containers in a virtualization context. And then you've got the likes of KubeVirt, which is about onboarding virtual machines into a Kubernetes world. You know, again, that's a gross simplification, but it's important to understand that there's a divide between containers and VMs, and it's about choosing the platform appropriately. So my signing off from my point of view, before I get your take, John, very quickly, is you know, OpenStack's not going to go away very soon. There's a run rate of, yes, it's a growing market to, you know, to the current stats till 2023. VMs are something which are, you know, part of everyday life, but it's certainly OpenStack is a springboard and a solid platform for alternative cloud platform uses. How about yourself?
Yeah, no, it's a good take. A very very comprehensive answer. It's obvious the only thing that is more passionate about OpenStack than you is probably your dog. Um, but yeah, no, I think you hit it spot on. I mean, I think there's a lot of synergy between Kubernetes and OpenStack. I think, you can't have scale at one level without scale in the other. And I understand, people want to go towards bare metal nodes when they're thinking of containers, but there's a lot of reasons why keeping them on VMs for scale purposes makes a lot of sense, as well as extra security. So I think there's a lot of, great things to be had when you bring the two of those together. And then the other one is just, I talked about a lot in the NFV lightning talk that we did, but the push to edge computing, right? We're going to have to decentralize networks. We're going to have to decentralize data if we want to keep pushing bandwidths higher and higher. And, OpenStack, I think, is a great platform to be able to do that while still centralizing management and getting the scale that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's certainly, I did say I was going to say my final point, but that's a really valid point. So if you think about what OpenStack is, I know people don't like to hear this because certainly in the world of saying how great it is that it's very easy to deploy in the standard architectures, but OpenStack is a suite of, number of cloud projects. And what we're seeing is maybe a little bit more of a breakup of those projects for specific purposes and goals. There are certainly offshoots from the OpenStack Foundation, in terms of, new products which help address the 5G, the NFE market, and all the edge computing. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting time over the next few years as to where OpenStack itself goes and the other projects of the OpenStack Foundation.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know we're kind of over time. So anybody that's, hanging on with us, please do. I think we do have a few questions. Um, there was a good one actually, around cloud native workloads. And the question really centers around, is OpenStack only good for cloud native workloads? Because some people tend to think that. You've been talking about it a little bit, but I don't think specifically addressed it.
No, so if you look at the world of where OpenStack fits, I mean, at one level, it's an API-driven platform to create virtual machines, right? So if you just see it as that kind of like basic entity, and then grow from there around capabilities, then certainly, if you want to just create virtual machines, you can treat those virtual machines as the pets, of the world. That the something that you would maintain as a normal virtual machine. Absolutely, it's something which can it will fulfill its duty just like any other virtualization platform. However, you would obviously you would lose, features of why you'd move to that particular platform. Whilst I say it's quite easy to deploy, there are additional, say, complexities, and you can't see me doing air quotes, but because of the fact that it comes with extra features. Now that's a good thing. It allows you to onboard your workload as it is. The kind of the lift and shift, but again, look, I've been an OpenStack architect, so just I don't want to say lift and shift, too often, in terms of virtualization to OpenStack, but it will give you an on-ramp to actually progress to further projects and how you'd utilize that platform in a different way. Now, of course, the basic premise of that question is a case of, okay, Kev, you've talked about the fact that you moved to OpenStack. It means you have more reliance on HA in the application than you do in the infrastructure, which some well-known products obviously are really, really good at. At that point, you have to basically evaluate the value from your existing platform and then see what features exist in terms of OpenStack. Does it have fault tolerance? No, it doesn't. Does it have features which allow redesign of your application to give, I wouldn't say fault tolerance, but certainly highly available nature of the right workloads of OpenStack? Absolutely. There's many ways to cut this in OpenStack world. But certainly it's not a straight VM type platform to OpenStack. That's just you'll get there until a controller node fails and you're trying to work out what the hell has gone on. Just use it as the next step, certainly, rather than a wholesale that'll do once I've done my lift and shift.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I think the only other question that we have right now, Kev, is what do you think is the competition of OpenStack?
Yeah, so I've talked of the, why people choose. So obviously it's the anti-question to that. So obviously people are choosing VMwares today. VMware have retrospectively, gone into the cloud world, of course. OpenStack has grown up from ground zero to where we are today in terms of a cloud platform. So that's a viable alternative. People are, going or staying and growing with the VMware platforms. There is the public clouds, of course. The public cloud is interesting in the fact that obviously that's all everybody talked about 3 or 4 years ago. It was a case of everybody has to go to the public cloud, and if you don't, you're basically stupid. Whereas obviously that's not the case. People were sensible and people just couldn't do this and for a million and one reasons. But if you could get to the public cloud, then obviously that's seen as competition. It's at the end of the day, OpenStack is a platform to run your business, and you've got to choose the best way to run your business and how that fits with the people developing their applications on that platform and a whole host of reasons. But of course, lastly, there is that cloud native world, the next level of application owners and developers where they genuinely don't care about the infrastructure. OpenStack went a part way in terms of you shouldn't care about the infrastructure, but really you've got to care a little bit. Cloud native is all about, I don't really care how that was all glued together, provided my application runs and scales. So of course, that's a viable piece of competition. But of course, all these are all about mindset changes as well. But yeah, certainly there will be the few that I would choose. The VMwares, that people choose today. There's the public clouds, which are, kind of obvious. And we're talking infrastructure as a service there, public clouds. And of course, the leapfrog to maybe, redeveloping wholeheartedly their application to take advantage of a container kind of world.
Yeah, I certainly couldn't have answered that one any better. Yeah, I think that's it for our question and answer. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Kevin, thanks for leading a great discussion. Both of our email addresses are on the screen right now. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please shoot us an email. Please also join us at KubeCon Europe next week.